The sun rose slowly over the quiet village of Rampur, bathing the dusty rooftops and crumbling walls in a soft orange hue. Birds chirped on electric wires while morning vendors began pushing their carts down the lane, calling out to early customers. In a modest two-story home near the edge of the village, Raghav Sharma opened his tired eyes to another lonely morning. Once a respected school principal known for his unwavering integrity and love for his students, Raghav now lived like a guest, no, like a ghost, in the very house he had built with the savings of a lifetime. His son, Vikram Sharma, a sharp-tongued middle-aged man with slicked-back hair and a perpetual frown, had grown distant over the years. The love that once sparkled in his eyes for his father had dulled into an impatient glare. Meena, Vikram's wife, once sweet and respectful when she married into the family, now treated Raghav like a pest, an obligation to tolerate. After Raghav's wife passed away 5 years ago, he had sold a piece of their ancestral land to help Vikram start a business. The funds, nearly 10 lakhs, were transferred to Vikram's account with complete trust. Raghav never asked for it back, not once. But as Vikram's life improved with a new car, better clothes, and lavish outings, Raghav found himself reduced to a forgotten shadow in his own home. His meals were served late, sometimes cold, and occasionally skipped entirely. He had no access to his own finances and no one to talk to. Neighbors had stopped visiting, perhaps uncomfortable with the tense atmosphere that hung over the house like a thundercloud. One day, Raghav asked Vikram for a small amount, just 5,000 Indian rupees, to donate to an orphanage, something he and his late wife did every year. Meena overheard the request and laughed cruelly. "We aren't running a charity here, Bauji," she sneered. "If you want to throw money away, go earn it." The insult pierced Raghav more deeply than he showed. He nodded silently and walked back to his small room, where faded photos of his school days and his wife lined the walls. That night, Meena confronted Vikram. "We need to get rid of him," she hissed. "He's old, useless, and one day he'll want more. Or worse, demand a share in the house." Vikram, caught between guilt and greed, hesitated. But only briefly. "I have an idea," he said, and what followed was a plan born from cruelty and cowardice. 3 days later, Vikram cheerfully told his father they were going on a picnic to the countryside, to a forested patch near their old farmhouse. Raghav was surprised but touched. It had been years since Vikram had offered to take him anywhere. He packed an old shawl, a steel tiffin box, and a bottle of water. The car ride was silent, save for Meena humming under her breath and Vikram pretending to answer fake phone calls. When they arrived, the forest was quiet, a thick canopy of trees blocking most of the sun. A few monkeys chattered from a distance. "Let's walk a little further in," Vikram suggested, leading Raghav by the arm. They reached an old banyan tree, gnarled and towering, its roots gripping the earth like claws. Suddenly, Vikram pulled out a chain and padlock. "What's this?" Raghav asked, confused. "Just a precaution," Meena said sweetly, then shoved him hard. Before he could react, Vikram looped the chain around his wrists and the tree, locking it tightly. "Please, what are you doing?" Raghav pleaded, panic rising. "You'll understand soon enough," Vikram replied coldly. They left a small bottle of water and a few biscuits on the ground and walked away. Raghav's cries echoed through the trees but faded into silence. The first night was terrifying. He heard animals rustling in the bushes. The cold seeped into his bones. He cried, screamed, prayed. No one came. On the second day, his throat dry, he hallucinated memories, his wife's laughter, students cheering on Teacher's Day, Vikram as a child running into his arms. He wept bitterly. A forest officer named Arjun patrolled nearby but the cries were too faint. On the third day, a storm rolled in. Raghav, weak and barely conscious, used a stone to scratch a farewell note on the tree bark, "Forgive them. My only sin was love." That afternoon, a firewood gatherer named Shambhu heard low moans. Curious, he followed the sound, and gasped at the sight of the frail old man, chained, shivering, nearly unconscious. The police were called immediately. When they arrived, what they saw shocked even the most hardened officers. Raghav was rushed to the hospital, barely breathing. The officers stood beneath the ancient tree, stunned by the cruelty. One of them whispered, "What kind of monster does this to their own father?" The chapter closes as the scene fades out on Raghav's pale face in the ambulance, and sirens wail into the distance. What would happen next? Would he survive? Would justice be served? What dark truth would be uncovered when the police investigated deeper? The truth was only beginning to unravel. The ambulance raced through the narrow roads of Rampur, its sirens slicing through the hot afternoon air as concerned villagers watched it disappear into the distance. Inside, Raghav Sharma lay unconscious, his frail body hooked up to oxygen, his hands still showing bruises from the heavy iron chains that had bound him to the tree for 3 torturous days. Doctors at the district hospital worked urgently to stabilize him, their faces etched with disbelief as they listened to the officers describe the horrific condition he had been found in. Meanwhile, the police quickly cordoned off the forest site, documenting every inch, the broken chain, the shallow footprints, the half-eaten biscuits, the stones still stained with dried blood from where Raghav had scratched his farewell note into the tree bark. That haunting message, "Forgive them. My only sin was love," shook the conscience of even the most seasoned officers. The forest officer, Arjun, who had heard faint cries the day before, blamed himself for not looking deeper. But now, justice had to begin. The police began retracing every step, and suspicion naturally fell on Vikram and Meena. They had already filed a missing persons report the morning after leaving Raghav in the forest, claiming he had wandered off during a walk and never returned. Their performance at the police station was almost convincing: crocodile tears, shaky voices, feigned despair. But the officers were not naive. When questioned separately, their timelines began to crumble. GPS data from Vikram's phone placed him exactly near the old banyan tree at the time Raghav would have been chained. Surveillance cameras on the highway caught their car leaving the area at dusk. Furthermore, a neighbor reported overhearing a heated argument days before, where Meena had called Raghav a burden and said she wished he would just disappear. The villagers, once silent, now erupted with stories: how Raghav had once been a pillar of the community, helping the poor, educating children for free, organizing festivals, and how he had grown more distant and sad over the past few years. Former students arrived at the hospital in tears, speaking to reporters about the men who had taught them not just math and science, but kindness, discipline, and hope. The media caught wind of the story: "Father chained to tree by son," flashed across television screens nationwide. Outrage poured in. Social media lit up with calls for justice, hashtags trending within hours. Meena and Vikram's photos were circulated online, their faces now synonymous with greed and cruelty. Under pressure, the police arrested the couple. In custody, Meena broke first, trying to pin the entire plan on Vikram. Vikram, in turn, blamed Meena's manipulations. But the truth was clear: they had both acted with cold intention. In the hospital, Raghav slowly regained consciousness. When he first opened his eyes, he was disoriented, but then tears rolled down his cheeks as he realized he had been saved. The officer who sat by his bedside held his hand gently and said, "Sir, we're going to get them. You're safe now." Raghav nodded weakly. He didn't ask for punishment. He only asked for answers. Why had his love, his sacrifices, his trust meant nothing? The courtroom was packed when the trial began. The prosecution laid out the evidence clearly: digital footprints, timelines, witness accounts, and Raghav's own statement. The judge listened silently as the elderly man, still recovering but determined, stood to speak. "I gave them everything," he said, voice trembling but firm. "Not just money. I gave them my life. I never asked for anything in return. Only love. Only dignity. But they left me to die." There was not a dry eye in the room. Even the stenographer paused, hands trembling. The defense attempted to play the insanity card, tried to question Raghav's mental health, but the evidence was overwhelming. The final verdict came swiftly. Vikram and Meena were sentenced to 20 years in prison for attempted murder, elder abuse, and criminal conspiracy. As they were led away, Vikram stared at his father, not with remorse, but with the emptiness of a man who had lost everything. Meena wept, finally realizing the weight of what they had done. Raghav refused to return to the house. Instead, he chose to live in a local old-age home, where he became something of a legend. The children there loved him, the staff respected him, and he spent his days teaching again, not in a classroom, but through stories, games, and quiet wisdom. The tree where he had once been chained was visited by many, not as a place of horror, but of reflection. Someone carved into the bark just below Raghav's message: "Ego ends where empathy begins." The story was shared in schools, news specials, and online platforms. It became a reminder to never take for granted those who raised us, and to remember that what we do to others, especially in darkness, will always be brought to light. And to this day, when the wind rustles through the leaves of that old banyan tree, some say you can hear a whisper in the silence, not of pain, but of peace. Raghav Sharma had survived, but more importantly, the world had awakened, to the truth, to the consequences, and to the power of kindness over cruelty.